Greetings. My name is Cameron Miller, and this is Trinity Place in Geneva, New York. Welcome. So this is kind of down and dirty. We heard, if you're watching the full worship video this morning, that the Gibbonses read Matthew's allegorizing parable about the wedding banquet, and now I want to give you what may be an even earlier version of that story. The Gospel of Thomas, which is not one of the canonical four, was still, some claim, as early, if not earlier, than the earliest canonical Gospel, Mark. It also sounds, at least in my mind, more like what we might imagine from a prophet like Jesus. So I'm going to just read you Thomas's shorter, simpler version of this same story. Thomas. A person was receiving guests. When he had prepared the dinner, he sent his slave in to invite the guests. The slave went to the first and said to that one, "My master invites you." And that one said, "Some merchants owe me money, and they're coming to me tonight, and I have to go and give them instructions. Please excuse me from the dinner." The slave went to another and said to that one, "My master has invited you." That one said to the slave, "I've bought a house, and I have been called away for a day. I shall have no time." The slave went to another and said to that one, "My master invites you." And that one said to the slave, "My friend is to be married, and I'm to arrange the banquet. I shall not be able to come. Please excuse me from the dinner." You see, they didn't have save the date cards in those days. The slave went to yet another and said to that one, "My master invites you." That one said to the slave, "I've bought an estate, and I'm going to collect the rent. I shall not be able to come. Please excuse me." The slave returned and said to his master, "Those whom you invited to dinner have asked to be excused." The master said to the slave, "Go out into the streets and bring back whomever you can find to have dinner." That's it. Now, Matthew's story is allegorized, and it adds quite a few horrendous details to it, so that Matthew's version basically says, you Jews who are not Jesus-following Jews like us have rejected God, so God rejects you and has given us the covenant. And then he basically says, and God doesn't love you either. But in both Luke's version of this story and Thomas's version, obviously, the ending is much different. God has specifically invited a great many people to the table, and when there's still more room at the banquet, God invites everyone who can be found to come to the party. That's all. That's the whole story. The stories we tell matter. The stories we tell matter. Now, Thomas's version is a powerful version. There's no shortage of seats at the table of God, so please join the feast. His is a story of abundance, not scarcity, of inclusion, not exclusion. Now, I talked last week about Matthew's motivations and the struggles going on in the synagogue with the early Jesus followers and Rome's special religious exemption for Jews. Matthew's version of this parable is more evidence of that tragic conflict going on. But Thomas's version of the story has none of that in the backdrop and may point to something closer to what Jesus would have told if indeed he told the story. Now, his story, simply put, is about the stunning abundance and radical inclusiveness of God's love. The stories we tell matter. That centering reading today from Where I Come From by Paula Gunn Allen is wonderful, and it puts a loudspeaker on this. The very ending of it goes like this. My mother told me stories about living and stories about dying. And in all those stories, she told me who I was supposed to be, whom I came from, and who would follow me. In this way, she taught me the meaning of the word she said, that all life is a circle and everything has a place within it. That's what she said and what she showed me and the things that she did and the way she lives. So much of the story we have told as Christians is about the scarcity of God's love. I mean, really, think about it. Christians tell a story about how God can't quite seem to forgive us unless we're sprinkled with water. And how God can't quite seem to love us if we don't believe the right things. And how God can't really even accept us if we don't know Jesus and don't proclaim Him as the biggest and the bestest. Really? Really? God's love is less generous than most human parents have toward their offspring? Really? Heck, I know people who have more generous love toward their dog, even when they can't do one trick. The stories we tell matter. When it's a candidate for president telling his or her story or telling their version of the national story, it matters what they tell. For us too, as individuals, it matters what story we tell about ourselves. Even a church community, it matters what story we tell about who we are, what we do, and how we got to be the way we are. So, I would really encourage us to give some extended, serious thought about the stories we tell, particularly the story that we tell about God and God's love. Now, you hear me regularly sort of deconstruct the biblical stories that we read, like I've done with Matthew most recently. That deconstruction is because the stories we tell become part of our story. And when we tell stories about a God too small to love as boundlessly as Thomas' versions of this story tells, then we become smaller too. And so, my friends, I invite us to spend time with our stories. The ones we tell about God, the ones we tell about ourselves, the ones we tell about each other. And for us to consider what the stories we tell create in us and create around us. Because, stories are powerful, and we need to respect their potency. Stories create. They give life. The stories we tell matter. Well, thank you for worshiping with us today. I hope that this experience in some way has contributed to your growth or your wellness or your healing, each of which we say here at Trinity Place is part of our story. So thank you, and peace be with you.